Whenever we think that Islam's reputation couldn't possibly be dragged any lower, we know we can always rely on Andy Choudary to pop up like some ludicrous bearded pig on a stick, bristling with so much fake righteous indignation you could warm your hands on it. He's irrepressible, isn't he? Like hospital food, you just can't keep him down. You may remember him as the former cider-guzzling, dope-smoking, porn-ogling Andy Choudary of yesteryear. Well, he's come a long way since those days, and now he's one of Britain's best-known benefit scroungers. He calls himself a Sharia judge, which would be true if the word Sharia meant imaginary. In fact, he isn't qualified to judge a knobbly knees competition. Many people in Britain consider him something of a mystery man, in that it's a mystery why he's not in prison for treason. An even greater mystery is why we are obliged to subsidise his noxious public ravings. Although he claims to speak from a moral standpoint, his actions show that he has the morality of a tick, claiming, as he does, more than £25,000 a year in benefit from the state he despises so much. That's from you and me and all the pensioners who've helped build this country and who now live on subsistence level, while Andy Choudary is free to live a life of leisure, stirring up hatred, lots and lots of hatred, insulting the living and the dead, praising terrorists and calling for gay people to be executed, among other choice comments. Some of his remarks have a cartoon-like quality, as when he called recently for Buckingham Palace to be turned into a mosque. Well, I agree that Buckingham Palace could be put to better use, but then so could every mosque. I'd like to see them all turned into pubs, for the sake of community cohesion, of course. We all know how important that is, and I'd be much more inclined to enter a mosque to find out what it's all about if I knew it served a good real ale. His latest stunt, which had everybody in Britain very animated over the last week or so, was a proposed protest march, which seemed specifically calculated to insult the relatives of British soldiers who have died in battle. And this proved a step too far for the government, who have decided to ban his entire organisation starting from today, which I think is a stupid move. Nothing unusual for this government, and a threat to freedom of speech. Again, nothing unusual for this government. Andy Choudary would be a nobody. Well, he is a nobody, but he'd be an unheard of nobody if the tabloid press hadn't puffed him up and turned him into the laughingstock he is. And yes, it's been great fun for the rest of us, up to a point, but we shouldn't forget that there are much more subtle minds than his at work in the same cause. People who talk in diplomatic terms publicly about dialogue and respect because they know that's where the government money is. But they want the same thing he does. They want an Islamic State in Britain, only he's stupid enough to shout about it all the time. The taqiyya merchants at the Muslim Council of Britain must tear their hair out in frustration every time they see this buffoon in the media, because they know he does more than anyone to alert people to the true nature of their backward, intolerant and deeply unpleasant religion. People say Choudary doesn't represent Muslims, and that's undoubtedly true. I know many Muslims think he's completely insane, and who could argue with that? But he does represent Islam in that he represents the aggressive Islam that's become such a huge problem in the free world. The so-called pure Islam that Saudi money is busy pushing into Western society with the connivance of the dhimmis-in-waiting in the multicultural appeasement lobby. The Islam that seeks to attack the fundamental values that make us what we are, knowing that if they can be cracked, everything else will fall apart. Like the principle of freedom of speech, which is under repeated attack at the third world pressure group we call the United Nations, or the principle that was established in this country 800 years ago in the Magna Carta, that everyone is entitled to swift and fair justice, and nobody is above the law. Well, that was before Islam came along. Because we discovered last summer that there are 85 Sharia courts operating quietly in Britain that the government had no intention of telling us about, and they're all entitled to discriminate quite openly against women in a way that would be illegal for anybody else. Would we tolerate an institution where people of a certain colour were treated that way? Where their word was worth half that of somebody of another colour? Not a chance. So why the double standards when it comes to women? Why do we collude with the poisonous idea that women are somehow inferior and incapable of self-determination? Because that is what we're doing in 21st century Britain, thanks to Islam and thanks to the Labour Party. Women's fundamental rights are worth less than the 7th century prejudices and superstitions of ignorant men. But if you really want an example of how political correctness has made us less civilized, then look no further than the obscenity of religious slaughter, which has crept into our society like a disease, thanks to Islam and thanks to the Labour Party, where millions of animals are now killed in needless pain and distress, in violation of every law on animal cruelty for the sake of human superstition. That's beyond disgraceful. It's beyond disgusting. It's a sin, if that word means anything at all. The opinion polls are telling us now that there is grave disquiet in Britain about Islam, and if things don't change, it's only going to get worse. Banning the likes of Andy Choudary is merely cosmetic. It's designed to distract people's attention from the Labour Party's deliberate Islamisation of our society. It won't make anybody safer. All it will do is give extremists a legitimate grievance about double standards and threaten everybody else's freedom of speech. Admittedly, poor old Andy Choudary will now have to go to all the trouble of thinking up a whole new name for his organisation, which could take him anything up to 2 seconds, so he's been put well and truly in his place, hasn't he? In the meantime, in New Labour's New Islamic Britain, it'll be business as usual. More uncontrolled immigration, more Muslim ghettos, more extremist mosques, more hate-preaching imams, more Sharia courts, more prayer rooms at work. They're fun, aren't they? More state-supported faith schools where little girls are forced to dress like nuns. More halal meat creeping into your kids' school meals without you being told about it. More restrictions at eating lunch at your desk during Ramadan in case somebody chooses to be offended. More Muslim-only swimming days for those delicate souls who just can't bear to mix with kuffar. More state benefits for extra wives. More forced marriages the authorities do nothing about out of cultural sensitivity. More female genital mutilation ignored by the police for the same cowardly reason. More universities encouraging extremism on campus and not being held to account. More frivolous lawsuits exploiting human rights legislation at the behest of the growing feelings industry, and lots more public money for divisive Islamist pressure groups who speak for nobody but themselves, all accompanied, of course, by the steady, relentless erosion of our basic freedom of expression for the sake of our old friend, community cohesion. That's what we've got in store, because that's what's gone before. And if things don't change, you know it's only a matter of time before you and your family are woken up every morning at 5 o'clock by some self-indulgent lunatic shouting across the rooftops. Andy Choudary is the pilot fish for that society. He's the bellwether. He's showing us the shape of things to come in all its stark insanity if we don't change direction. He's showing us what the Islamists at the Muslim Council of Britain have in store for Britain if they ever get their way, and in that he's actually doing us a huge favour, only he's too thick to realise it, thank goodness. So thank you, Andy, for all your help. It's really very much appreciated. Please don't let this little setback put you off. I know you won't. Hurry up and reform your scruffy little gang of hysterical, fuzzy-faced nutjobs under a new name and get that ugly mug of yours back in the media where it belongs, because God damn it, you crazy bastard, we need you. Peace. It's a beautiful thing.